blackballing and the complete where people lost their jobs and lives were stripped when somebody was called a communist. Now we're moving into the era of they're a terrorist and off they go to jail, never to be heard from again. And this cannot happen in the United States of America if we're going to hold this country to what it is supposed to be.
David, how has this affected you career-wise, standing strong, fighting the good fight? Has it backfired on you?
I've lost some readers, but I think I've gained far more than I've lost. The only thing that's bothered me is that, in the past I've written about things that were controversial, and you get some blowback. Sometimes, a couple of readers will email you and tell you, that you forgot to ask this important person this very important question that you should have asked, and you're being a bit of a sellout by not asking it. And that's just, when you're a writer, that's what you get. You get
that happens.
Response. But something very strange has been happening where a couple of people, and I don't even know their identities, just seem to be after me. I'll post anything, and within seconds, there are responses, and they're extremely vicious. And I don't understand why, because the NDAA is not something that's really up for discussion. The ACLU, Amnesty International, all these human rights organizations, they all interpret it the same way. I'm not even the one analyzing it. I'm just trying to be a clearinghouse for information. And I've never seen this level of personal hatred toward a writer before in my life. And I've noticed it happening to a couple of other journalists who've been covering this heavily on Twitter and elsewhere, where these people just come out from nowhere and you don't know what their agenda is. Well, I guess you do know their agenda is to discredit whoever is really talking this up.
There are some haters out there in the internet land. They're on websites. I mean, they have no life. All they do is sit back and hate because they have no life. They're trapped in their little room and they hate the world. But in your particular case, maybe you're being watched, by some agency.
Well, I mean, I think another possibility is that some people are just really frightened by the implications of this, of what's been done. And so they still want to kind of defend the Obama administration and defend Congress and say, this guy's blowing it out of proportion. This should never be used this way. Because the reality of it, once it sinks in, is that what Obama did in, best case scenario, what Obama did is outright incompetence, and it's unacceptable.
Well, they all did.
Worst case scenario.
They all did it.
Worst case scenario is it something quite sinister,
But they all did it. The House did it. The Senate did it.
Oh, of course.
He signed it. I mean, they were all part of it.
But David, there is a sense of betrayal from President Obama because he knew what this NDAA would do. He articulated it before he put that signature on that afternoon of New Year's Eve. And in talking to the attorney at the ACLU and to Professor Tushnet at Harvard Law, they both said the same thing. We've been 10 years away now from 9/11. Osama bin Laden is dead. We're out of Iraq. We're trying to get out of Afghanistan. The government has no reason at this point. Congress has no reason to try to pass this kind of an indefinite detention statute. And it raises these questions. What else is going on behind the matrix that would have sort of provoked this when it's not necessary, and every legal analyst that I know says this is highly dangerous.
Linda, that's the story.
I completely agree.
That's the story. What is going on that they know about that could happen in a year or two, and they think that they need some kind of a law like this in order to round up Americans? What are they going to do? What do they hear? And to me, that's the bigger story. David?
Well, Colin Powell's former chief of staff went on Russia Today on their cable network, and they've been one of the few cable networks that's been really all over this story. And I guess because they're in Russia, not the U.S., or at least their ownership is. And he said that he thinks the NDAA's indefinite detention provisions will be used against Occupy protesters. In other words, peaceful protesters who are unhappy with the level of inequality in this country and are not afraid to go out there and use, every legal means they have available to them to raise awareness for that.
I would say if we saw what has happened in the Arab Spring, that kind of protest, that kind of people being so upset, that the NDAA would be used without a doubt.
Right. And the issue there is they're going the wrong way, because Americans should not fear Americans. This, if there are huge protests and there are millions of people complaining about the government's direction on Twitter and all over the place and on shows like yours, then maybe the government should listen instead of passing new legislation to crack down on these protesters.
I used to get upset with people who burn the American flag. In my early days doing my early radio shows, I even pushed for laws that these people would be arrested and put away, because if they want to burn the flag, then get out of the country, and we're going to arrest you if you don't go. I changed that. I realized that though I don't agree with it, and after spending 9 years in the Navy and loving this country, if you burn the flag, you're a lowlife as far as I'm concerned, because the country and the government are two different things, but it's their right in this country to do that.
The First Amendment says the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And if we are going to start having testosterone pumping laws like this NDAA that can snuff all of that out, we are snuffing out the Constitution and what is left. And this is so important to get across right at this moment, that the ACLU is very concerned about what has happened, and they now have at aclu.org. I hope everyone listening will go to aclu.org, and what you want to do is to find Know Your Rights, what to do if you're stopped by police, immigration agents, or the FBI, and now whoever would be authorized under this NDAA. And it gives right there. You can cut it out and put it in your purse and your billfold and keep forever, and call up and find out where your local ACLU office is and write that phone number on what your rights are. And keep it, because the ACLU wants to be at least filling in the gap while maybe the courts are going to wrestle out this NDAA.
David, we have a minute to go. You have the final word.
The ACLU is a great resource. Also, just use your voice. We're seeing what's happening now is not only has the NDAA been signed into law, and they're trying to move along with the EEA, the Enemy Expatriation Act, they're trying to crack down on free speech online. So while we have it, let's just tell absolutely everybody we know about this and that it's been signed into law, because, like I said, what I've noticed across the board is once somebody finds out about this and they're convinced that it's real, which doesn't take very long for them to see that it's real, they start telling everyone. It spreads like wildfire.
Oh, there's no doubt. Yesterday, a webmaster, Lex Lonehood, put it on our Twitter feed. Everybody was on this story. Everybody. David's websites are linked up at coasttocoastam.com for you, his Twitter and his website. And, of course, Linda's website, earthfiles.com. In a moment, Linda and I return. We will be talking with Tyrell Ventura, Jesse's son. Get ready for that. Thank you, David. We will be back in a moment. We're very fortunate in this country to have people like Jesse Ventura to just say it the way they believe it, the way they see it. And we've got the same with Jesse's son, Tyrell, who will join us in a moment. I'll tell you a little bit about him when we come right back with Linda Moulton Howe on Coast to Coast AM. Okay, welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. As I mentioned, Tyrell Ventura is the son of Jesse Ventura. He's the producer and now co-host as well of the popular television show that Jesse's on, Conspiracy Theory, for more than 10 years. He's been a producer, writer, and director in L.A. and is currently involved with free speech issues in the Occupy Wall Street movement. And welcome Tyrell Ventura to Coast. Tyrell, welcome.
Thank you for having me on. Big fan of the show. Great work you guys do.
Well, you do too, and your dad as well. I remember the very first time that he came on the program, how illuminating he was, and just captured the hearts of everybody that listens to this show. And you ought to be proud of him, Ty, and I'm sure you are.
Oh, I'm very proud of the good work my father's done over the years, and his ability to kind of speak truth to power. It's rare in our lifetimes that we have individuals like him that are brave enough to do that. But he couldn't not do it. He's got too much of an opinion. He's got too much of a deep love for this country. That when he sees wrongdoing, he will speak out against it and fight against it if necessary.
I thought for a moment he was going to make a presidential run. I really thought he might have been able to capture some of the nomination.
Well, he's not a Republican or a Democrat, so it's really kind of hard for him then to run because you need ballot access in all 50 states.
Yeah.
One of the secrets that they don't let out is that you can't just kind of sign your name and then, hey, I'm on the ballot. They make you jump through an enormous amount of hoops in order to get ballot access, and the rules are different for every state. So it makes it very hard for anyone not part of the corporate political system we have today to make a successful run. But he's made it known that if Ron Paul were to leave the Republican Party and run as, say, a libertarian or somebody outside of the two-party dictatorship, that he would be more than happy to be a vice presidential candidate or something like that. Or at least he'd consider it. He'd consider it and think it over. I mean, that's a big choice to make in life. He's definitely not ruled anything out, but at the same time, he hasn't said, yes, he is. It's a life-changing experience to get involved in that process, and the mudslinging starts. I think we've already had this in the last two weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Completely false stories put out about him that I think, my opinion, were designed in kind of a swift boat-esque attack against him for fear that he would potentially run against their two puppet candidates that they run every year.
That's right. Absolutely. Linda, let's bring you in here. I don't think you've had an opportunity to talk with Tyrell Ventura, so come on in, Linda.
Well, thank you. And hi, Tyrell. I am so curious about what your father, Jesse Ventura, thinks of the NDAA.
Oh, he wildly opposes it. When he first found out about it, he kind of like the rest of us were like, really? They have a bill like this? Because it's so violently against the very nature and fabric of what our country was founded upon. The military is not designed as a police force. Even when using it overseas, it's not designed as a police force. A military army should not be used for that, whether against its own citizens or foreign citizenry.
And one of the big holes in this that has been pointed out to me by lawyers is that under this NDAA, what a shock, there is no detailed requirement for proving a crime and charging someone with a crime, which is the normal legal process inside of the United States. That means that the NDAA carried to its logical extreme, a person can be simply stated by the Department of Defense as a terrorist on suspicion, and suspicion alone, with no requirement for proving crime or charge, is necessary.
That's what makes it so, terrible. And the fact that I think today we have a country that is essentially, it's up to the whim of the leader. I mean, yes, you might have a leader who's not going to, use this newfound power and authority, and that's great. Hopefully Obama's not that kind of leader, or the next president is that kind of leader. But down the line, you don't know. Just because you elect someone to president doesn't necessarily mean they're a good, decent person. And you could get a despot in charge and use these laws that are now in place to violently lock us down and turn us into a police state.
No, that's so true. Go ahead, Linda.
Which comes back full circle to what we were talking about in the previous half hour. What could be behind the matrix, behind the screen that is going on, that members of Congress are being pressured by someone in the Defense Department to push this egregious NDAA through with basically violating the Constitution of the United States in this statute?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at some of the things that Colonel Fletcher Prouty wrote, who, as we all remember, was kind of the basis for the character of X in the film JFK, and he was directly in the Pentagon and liaised with the CIA in his book Secret Team. He wrote that most of your congressmen, they don't necessarily write the bills, or when they get they're fed information, and then they act on that